We studied about Smyrna our last class, and this is the shortest letter. Smyrna is the shortest letter to all of the seven churches. Goes down through verse 11, and I think starts with verse 8. So we got 8, 9, 10, only 4 verses to this church. And this is one of the 2 churches that Jesus did not have anything to reprove them. And we'll just read these 4 verses since it's a short. It'll bring back maybe to our memory what we talked about. In chapter 2, Revelation 2 and verse 8, to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, who was dead and lived again. I know thy tribulation and thy poverty, but thou art rich, and the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews, and they are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Fear not the things which thou art about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and thou shalt receive a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. And so that is the little short letter to the church at Smyrna. No reproofs, no rebukes, nothing to correct there. Just an encouragement and exhortation to remain faithful, because they are suffering persecution. And not only have they been suffering persecution, they're going to suffer more. Because Jesus says Satan was going to cast them into prison that they may be tried 10 days. Now the 10 days there is a figurative length of time. It's not a 10 literal days. It is a full and complete time. In other words, they're going to be tried until their test is complete. God is allowing Satan to do this, and we talked about that in our last class. God allows us to be tempted, but he tries us. He puts us to the test to see if we're going to pass the test. And of course, we never know if we'll pass until we take the test. We have high hopes that we'll pass. You probably remember when you had tests in school, you'd get a little bit nervous and uptight about it, hoping that you would do good. But you never knew until you took the test how you were going to do. And so the outcome of that test was informative to you. It told you your weaknesses, where you needed to put more emphasis and put more studies. And this is the way our spiritual tests are. If we have a temptation and we don't pass it, we know what we need to work on. And so we need to do that. Is any comment on what he said to Smyrna before we look at some of the slides about the city there? Anyone have a comment or a question? All right, let's look at some of these slides at Smyrna. And this is the source of these slides, the Pictorial Library of Bible Lands, and you can get this DVD at BiblePlaces.com. This one, it's got hundreds and hundreds of pictures on it, a lot more pictures on it than we'll look at, but it's very high quality pictures, and I highly recommend it. If any of you would like to order one, see me after class and I'll give you more information about it. This is the map of Western Turkey, what is now Western Turkey, and of course that's the area where the 7 churches were. Ephesus is here, and Old Smyrna is up here. Ephesus there, Old Smyrna here, and it was about 37 miles from Ephesus to Smyrna. Now, this is the only place Smyrna is mentioned in the New Testament. But the city of Smyrna here was a thriving city and still is. It's called Izmir now. But it's a city of about 200,000 people, and we'll see in just a moment that the old city was very close to where the new city is, that it's kind of right downtown in part of it. Even though they've got it separated here, and this was Izmir, and that's old Smyrna. So that is a panoramic view of Izmir. And of course, this is the tower for the airport. And this building here, in front of this building, this is where we're going to look at some ruins. So you can see how the new city is just built up around part of the ruins that we're going to be looking at. And because of this, there hasn't been a lot of excavations done there, because it would be so disruptive to the people that live there now, because their houses are built up on top of these ruins. But they have excavated some of it, and we'll see some of that here, but there's a lot more that could be learned from there if they would allow the archaeologists to dig. This is another picture of the modern city, and this is from the Acropolis. The Acropolis was a high hill located where they built part of the old city for protection. But looking down from that hill, you can tell how we're looking kind of downhill, and from the Acropolis back here looking down. This is a view of the harbor. It has a very good harbor, and this really made it good for trade because it had access to the sea lanes, and this helped the city to grow. Having access to the harbor. You can see how mountainous it is around Smyrna in this area. And so the Acropolis is built up on top of one of these mountains. Now here's some of the old buildings up there. This is the Velvet Castle on the Acropolis itself. So this is up on top of the mountain, and this is an old building. Here is a part of the old foundational wall that was built in Hellenistic times. This city goes back to about the 5th century BC, before Christ. So it's a very old city, and a lot of these foundational stones here have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now here are some of the ruins in the city, and this was we'll see more of this, the Acropolis cistern, where they stored their water. Since they were on top of the mountain, they had to have a place to have water in case they had a siege. So they would be able to live in that city, within the walls of the city during the siege. And so in order to do that, they had to build cisterns. And this was a cistern. And you can see how the Romans building and the Greeks used the arches, and these arches would support a lot of weight, and so they built these arches, and then they put the land right on top of it, and then they could build on top of the land. And I'm amazed at the engineering that they had back in those days and times. Now you can see here just how these ruins are right here, and the new city is built all around. In fact, the airport is just right back over here. But we see a lot of these ruins are right in this area here, and you can understand why they couldn't do a lot of archaeological work with all of these modern buildings there now. It would just be too disruptive. And here's some of the the ruins of the agora. Remember, the agora is the shopping place. The Greek word agora is to buy, and so that's where they would shop. They had shops there, and you can see these colonnades would support roofs, and those roofs would cover the area for the shops and so forth. And again, this is right downtown today. These are more of the archaeological fragments from those ruins, and they're quite extensive. Their only problem is they can't dig to find them. They know they're there, but they just can't dig to find them because it would disrupt so many businesses. And here is a line of those arches, and we're going to see how they use those arches here, but this is a view above ground. Now here's a closer up view of it, and you can see down under the arches there's space, and this space down there was used for shops. This was part of the agora, and so they built those shops down under here, and actually they had 3 levels. There was a level here, and a level that they built up here. So this would be a 3-level building here, an area. Now this is down in the arches, and you can see it's almost like a hallway. Well, they would have shops on this side and shops on that side, and they would have another row of arches over here, and it just made their shopping mall underground like that. And we can understand how they could do that by seeing this type of construction. And these arches are hundreds of years old, but you can see that they're still in pretty good shape. They look like that they could hold up quite a bit of weight. But they have, the archaeologists have dug these out and been able to find these ruins. And here's the northern gate to the agora, and of course these columns on top of these arches, you can see back in there's rooms all back in there, and these columns up here would support a roof, and they would be stores up here. So their cities back then were pretty good. Even though they were ancient, they were not primitive. They were very educated and very well learned. This is a carved lion, what's left of it, and you can see some of the detail there, and even the eye. You know how piercing lions' eyes are, and you can almost get that feeling just looking at that eye that it's still there. They've captured that characteristic there with that, and I don't know how people can do that with a hammer and chisel and rock, but some of these sculptures are just beautiful. Look at the intricate work of this sculpture, and this is in stone. They do this right out of stone, and I can't imagine the man hours involved in doing something like this. And the symmetricalness of it, it goes down and it all looks alike. It looks just almost like it's stamped. It's just amazing to me. And how in the world they can keep that little connection there and knock stone out all around it and not break that, I don't know. To me, it's just amazing how they can do that. Now here's a fragment with Mark Antony on it. You can see it. It's in Greek, Mark Antony, and it's all in capital letters. Now we know that Mark Antony was back around just before the turn of the millennium, and so we're going back here to 0 A.D., you know, and from 0 to 50 A.D. and 50 B.C. to 50 A.D. in that area. So this is ancient history. But our civilization was built on these civilizations. This was the cradle of Western civilization, and even today, our law has a lot of Roman law in it. This is one thing the Romans did, is they gave the world civil law, because the Romans were big law people. Now this kind of is amazing to me because they say it's an Islamic sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is a bone box. And what they would do is they would have a family tomb, and they would bury those who died in the family in that tomb, and then after the flesh would rot, they would go in there and collect the bones and put the bones in a box. And this bone box may have 8, 10, 12 people's bones in it, because they used that tomb over and over and over again, because they were so hard to build out of rock. But this is a sarcophagus, and it has the Star of David on it, but yet they say it's Islamic. Now, Islam only didn't start till 722 A.D. So we know this is not ancient, but the history goes back there, and there were Muslims in there. In fact, the Ottoman Empire was out of Turkey. Turkey was where the Ottoman Empire started, and they conquered a great part of the world. And here is a part of the old fortification. Now this is the original. This goes back to the 5th century B.C. So it's very old. And this wall was about up to 12 or 14 feet high, and it was hundreds of yards long. So this was a wall for protection. And here's another part of it. And these stones have been there since all those hundreds of years ago. And here is some of the ruins looking back towards the modern city. And these ruins, the city was just built all around these ruins. And here is a street. Of course, it used to have stones in it, but evidently the archaeologists haven't excavated the stones. And one of the historians commented on how straight the streets in Smyrna were. This street here looked like it's got a little bend in here, but it's relatively straight. But some of the streets in these old cities were just one building length, and then they would turn, and they were like a jigsaw puzzle. Not hardly any of them were straight. But Smyrna was known for its being a beautiful city, and with its straight streets. Here is a temple of Athena, which is the oldest Greek temple in this part of the world. Now this temple, the ruins from this temple go back to 500 and 600 years before Christ, and this was of Athena. And of course that was the goddess of Athens, a Greek goddess. Now here's a spring house. The water came out of this mountain, and this was the spring where the spring was, and they would go there to collect their water. Now this is a synagogue street here. Now Smyrna had a lot of Jews. In fact, this one street had some 7 synagogues on it. Think of that. One street with 7 church buildings. And so you can imagine the number of Jews that would have to be there to support that type of, that number of synagogues. Well, if you remember, this is one of the things that Jesus talked about, was that there were those who were at Smyrna who called themselves Jews, and they were not, but they lied. Well, and these Jews had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. They were there when John wrote this, because Jesus talked about them. Here's the Shalom synagogue. The word Shalom is a Hebrew word that means peace. And it really means that everything is as it should be. And that's what the word would mean. It was also a greeting, and they would say it when they parted from one another. So the same word was used for both as a greeting and to say goodbye. Here's a modern picture of what you might see there now if you were to go to Smyrna and see in the bazaar, the shopping. And it's this way in all parts of Turkey. Istanbul has a lot of this. So that's some of the old pictures of Smyrna. Does anyone have any comment or questions on any of those? Okay, if you'll look at verse 12 then, we'll go right on into our lesson, continuing with Pergamum. Pergamum is the 3rd city that John writes, and he was commanded to write this city. And verse 12, he says, to the angel of the church in Pergamum write, these things saith he that hath the sharp two-edged sword. Now, we know that this is Jesus, because this is one of the physical characteristics that were used of him in chapter 1 to describe the voice. When John said he turned to see the voice that spoke with him, and he saw one like unto the Son of Man in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks, and he described his dress and so forth. It was Jesus there in Revelation 1:16. He says he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth proceeded a sharp two-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shining in its strength. Now, so Jesus here, in talking to the brethren at Pergamum, identifies himself as he that hath the sharp two-edged sword. And I think this is fitting for a couple of reasons, is because of the suffering that they were undergoing there because of persecution. And another reason was Satan's throne was located there. And we'll see that, I think, in the next verse. But Pergamum needed a Jesus that knew about their condition and that was able to protect them in this time of persecution and give them some hope of being able to weather the storm, so to speak. And so by their knowing that he had a sharp two-edged sword, he was equipped with both a defending mechanism and a mechanism to teach and to instruct. The Hebrews writer talked about the Word of God being quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of the joints and marrow, and talking about its ability to penetrate the thoughts and hearts so that our minds are laid open before him with whom we have to do. Well, Jesus' sharp two-edged sword is really his word. And he uses that to do two things. He uses it to punish, and he uses it to instruct and teach. And so I think that's the idea of it being two-edged. It's symbolic of its ability to punish and to condemn, to judge, render judgment, which he's going to do against his enemies here. And this is what the book of Revelation is all about. And at the same time, his word is able to console, to instruct, to give us hope, comfort. And so I think that that's the idea of it being two-edged. Is any comment on verse 12? Verse 13, he says, I know where thou dwellest, even where Satan's throne is, and thou holdest fast my name, and didst not deny my faith, even the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you where Satan dwelleth. Now, Antipas was a Christian martyr there at Pergamum. This is all we know about him. We don't know when he was killed or how, but we do know that he was a martyr. In fact, in the Greek, the word that's translated here, witness, this word witness in the Greek is martyr in the Greek, which is where we get our word martyr from. And so Antipas was his martyr, and Jesus says he was his faithful one, indicating that he did not deny his name even when he was being persecuted, but he was killed among them where Satan dwelleth. Now, Satan's throne was there, and archaeologists have found a throne that's called Satan's throne. And I want to get down to this. This is some of the background information on where King Attalus II bequeathed his kingdom to Rome in 133 B.C. There was a great library there. It had written on sheepskins, which were called Pergamena Charta, and this is where we get our word parchment from. And there were many idol temples there. Zeus, one to Athene, one to Apollo, Asclepius, Dionysius, and Aphrodite. And Asclepius was the main idol there. He was the god of healing. And you see his symbol today when you look at a doctor's office. You'll see that pole with a snake around it. And that's Asclepius' symbol. In fact, he was the Greek god of healing, so doctors today take the Hippocratic Oath, and it goes back to this Asclepius. And his sacred thing was the snake. And of course, that's a symbol for Satan. So this gives you some idea of Satan's throne being there. It gives you some idea of the mental attitude of these people towards Christians. And people would go there to be treated, and one of the treatments was to sleep in Asclepius' temple, and it had snakes crawling around all over the floor. You slept with the snakes. And if one would bite you, now these were not poisonous, but if one bit you, that was a good omen that you were going to be healed. Now this was the idea that these people had, and this was for hundreds of years. And thousands of people practiced this type of healing and these types of things. So we can see how Christianity has elevated mankind, because this is what they knew. This is all they knew. It was this type of thing. That's why they had so many idols, so many temples, because they were afraid they would leave out a God, and if they did, he would become angry with them, and he might punish them some way, send a storm or an earthquake or sickness or plague or something, and they would say it was because the gods were angry. And they didn't know what they did to make him angry. They didn't know what to do to appease him. And they just lived in fear all the time. And so when Christianity came and dispelled this darkness, this ignorance, this fear, it just elevated the people. And there's no doubt this is one reason why Christianity just exploded. And in the space of about 50 years, it just took the Roman world by storm. And that's what we're talking about here in this. Let's see, let's go down now to verse 14. Is any comment on verse 13?
Is that kind of like where Paul tells them to the unknown God that they have?
Yeah, that was in Athens, very, very similar to this.
Proclaim the Lord God Jesus Christ to them.
Yeah. And it was a way to open the door. He says, you worship this God. You've got an idol to the unknown God. He's the one I want to tell you about. And so he preached that sermon and told them about it. And it was a very good way of approaching them without offending them, because they worshiped an unknown God. Okay. Satan's throne here symbolized a governmental committee which enforced emperor worship. Now here's a picture of it. Now this structure, if you note, it even kind of looks like a throne. It's got the seating area here where you can seat and lean back, and these are the armrests. It kind of looks like a throne. And this thing was unearthed by archaeologists there and taken to the museum. I think it's in Berlin today. Yeah, Berlin, Germany, yeah. And this is one of the most decorated structures in Hellenistic period, during the Greek period. It's the altar of Zeus, located in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, Germany. And I've seen close-ups of it, and the decoration on this thing is unbelievable. It's really beautiful. But the thing it represented was a throne to Satan. And you can imagine, if they held him in such high esteem, what a battle Christianity had. And this is just, no wonder the Christians were persecuted, because there were people who were very loyal to these idols, and they didn't want their idols to be come in disrepute, so they were angry with the Christians as a result of this. Okay, we'll stop there with verse 14, because that'll be a good place to stop, because that's where he starts reproving the Christians at Pergamum, and we'll start there, Lord's willing, Sunday morning. Any comment on class? Any final question? Well, thank you very much for your participation and attention in class.